This is Podcast Theory.
Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Podcast Theory. I'm your host, Jason Sircone, and for today's episode, I want to take some time to talk about the most critical aspect of podcasting. Well, depends on who you talk to. I feel it's the most critical aspect of podcasting. It's time. And in addition to that, it's timing. Understanding time and how it relates to your podcasting practices is going to make all of the difference. And the reason why I interweave timing into this conversation is because if you're starting a brand new podcast from the ground, it may look like this overwhelming thing in front of you. How am I going to get this done? There's so much to consider. And if you listen to my show or any other podcasts about podcasting, you'll hear that there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to podcasting. There's no doubt about that. But one thing that you do need to understand is that the moving parts can all work in synergy if you attack things the right way. Ultimately, what I'm driving at is that you need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy for how your podcast is going to work for your brand. And that's going to help with understanding timing and how much time you have to dedicate to the show. The reason why I want to talk about this today is as I sit and come to you today with this episode of Podcast Theory, I am one day removed from production with one of my clients, Burkage Design. And we did the first season of their podcast recording, at least the initial recording of those episodes, in a 2-day span. When we first started this process, I remember telling Cassie, the owner of Burkage Design, all about what we were going to do and how this was going to come together. But even she, in her own mind, had built it up to be so grand that it did not seem like it could all come together that smoothly. And she told me as such, and I took some ownership of that. I felt like maybe I did not do a good enough job explaining that this was how this was going to work. And I completely get it. If you've never done a podcast before, that time element can seem like something it's just going to absolutely suck away all the time that you have to do this. And this is why when I talk about timing, I feel that, first of all, you have to think about what the time is in your schedule to do this, and that's going to impact how you create this content. So if you are a busy business owner, professional, entrepreneur, coach, consultant, working with somebody else, working for another person's company, and been tasked with starting a podcast for that brand, you know that the podcast is typically not the only thing that you have on your plate. You have a lot of things that you are responsible for. And adding podcasting to the mix is another thing that's going to require you to dedicate time to do it right. If you don't understand that on the front end, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by the process. And this is why I feel so many podcasts don't get beyond their first few episodes, because aspiring podcasters who want to utilize this for their brand aren't following the right steps to launch their show. They're putting way too much work on themselves, and they're putting too much pressure on themselves to a point where they say this isn't worth it. But without defining the best reasons why this podcast will work for your brand in the very beginning, before you ever press record, before you ever even buy a microphone, if you're not doing that, you are setting yourself up for failure. And in all that is also the time that you have to dedicate to doing this the right way. So if you are doing a podcast with no time structure in place, yeah, you are going to bomb out. It's inevitable. The burnout will start to happen. It's only a question of when. This may happen in the first few episodes, which again, we've seen so many podcasts, unfortunately, go to the graveyard just because there wasn't a plan in place. Also, when I think of it, there's that lack of launch strategy, because in my opinion, and I've mentioned this on past episodes of Podcast Theory, if you are not recording a number of episodes in advance of your launch, so you have episodes in the bank, so you can also put attention on those other responsibilities in your life, that is absolutely a recipe for disaster. Because if you just put out one episode as a test balloon to see what happens, then ultimately things are going to fall apart because more than likely that episode won't hit these grand expectations that you've built for yourself. You have to do this the right way. So factoring in time with all of this is an incredible piece of the pie. Now, the reason I want to talk about timing is because there is a right time to start your brand podcast, and it's right the hell now. And the reason why I say maybe I'm biased because I'm a podcaster. I've been doing this for a long time. I help people launch podcasts. And this is where I feel that timing plays a critical role because we're looking at it as this grand thing. Like I said, most people that have never done this before are thinking about podcasting on this grand scale of, oh my God, all these things. There's just how we ever create this task list and then accomplish all these items. It's just so much, right? But a proper plan is going to help you do that. And there's nothing in regards to timing that should throw that plan off. And what I mean by that is you have to think about it like other things in your life. If you're a parent, you may think there's this perfect time to have a kid. But what most parents will tell you is that in most cases, it was unexpected, but you make things work. You properly adjust because you know you wanted that child in your life. You wanted to grow your team, as they say on Parks and Recreation. And once that child comes into your life, you figure out how to make life work. And now this child is a part of your world and you do your part to make things work smoothly. It's the same in business. There are always going to be things that are going to come across your plate. And you may think that the timing is just not right to start a podcast today. Man, I've got all these things to worry about in Q3. And this seems like more of a Q4 type of problem or a Q4 type of thing. Let me deal with the Q3 problems and then we'll tackle this in Q4. Well, you know damn well what happens when you get to Q4. All the Q4 problems come up. Now, all of a sudden, well, doing a podcast should be a Q1 thing. We'll kick off the first quarter of the year strong. We'll start a podcast. And then you get to Q1 and all of a sudden the Q1 problems are in front of you. See what I'm driving at here is that there's always going to be things. There's always going to be responsibilities, initiatives, obstacles, hurdles, things that you could put in front of yourself. And it easily becomes an excuse. Well, I can't start a podcast now because I've got XYZ to accomplish first. If you're building a brand, you're always going to have marketing in front of you. You need marketing so you are making the proper connections. You're getting your product out there. You're raising awareness. You're letting people know what you do. You're letting people know the solutions you have in place, and you're letting them know why your solution is the one that's going to help them solve the problem that they have. This is what marketing is all about. So you're always going to need to do that. You're always going to be in a position, no matter where you are and what other initiatives and issues and obstacles you have in front of you, you're always going to need to market your business and market your brand. Podcasting fits into that seamlessly if you do it the right way. I'm not talking about adding something onto your plate that's going to completely throw everything off. I'm talking about adding something to your marketing plan that synergizes everything that you're doing and in a lot of ways simplifies your marketing strategies, because in today's marketing world, you need content. Content is what drives brands forward. It's what lets people know what your brand is all about. And more than likely, you have this checklist of things that you're trying to create for content, for email, for blogs, for social media, for videos. Across the board, you are trying to come up with content that's going to let your audience know why you are the resource they should trust. Your podcast could help serve all those masters. And that's why interjecting this into your marketing strategies isn't about timing. It's about having a tool in place that helps you build all the materials that you're going to need anyway. So saying, if we do this in Q3 or Q4 because we don't have time right now, it just seems to make more sense. You're just making more work for yourself because you're still going to need to do all of those items that podcasting can take care of. And believe me, I get it. If you've never experienced this, if you've never seen this in action, it can be hard to comprehend. Because you're thinking of a podcast in the one way that you've always seen it, this audio component that lives on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you listen to it when you're at the gym or in the car. But what you're not thinking about, and this is the one thing that I want brands to understand. Podcasts are more than just the audio component that you listen to. For business, for what you need to drive your brand forward, a podcast could be everything. It really could. It's all about building a proper strategy and then understanding how to use that content for the best purposes. If you think about it on this level of, well, I've got to get thousands and thousands of downloads, you're not looking at it the right way. I believe that we need to get beyond thinking about podcasting as just a means of gathering downloads so we could sell ads and sell sponsorships. All those things will come as your podcast grows. But you want some early gains and some early wins from your podcast, you start looking at it as a content engine that you can pick apart, restructure, repurpose, and start hitting people where they live. Where is your audience coming at you? Where do you see the most interaction and the most engagement? Is it through LinkedIn? Is it through your email newsletter? Is it through your website? Is it through a blog? Is it through YouTube? I don't know. I mean, this is completely subjective. You look at what they are where you look at where your audience is interacting with you the most, and that's where you'd want to focus your content. And more than likely, that's what you're doing. But with a podcast, you're creating a wealth of content where you can keep that engagement up. You can keep those messages flowing. You can keep raising awareness for who you are, what you do, and why you are the brand to solve the problem your target customer has. This is what podcasting can do. And today, in addition to talking about timing and talking about understanding your time, I'm here to tell you we have to start looking at this on another level. And it's elevating the level. It's a new level of understanding when it comes to podcasts. It's not just about it's not just about the downloads. It's not just about building this massive audience across the world. It's about getting the proper content in front of the right people so they take the next step. Whatever that step may be is completely up to you, whether it's to join your email list, to follow your social media, to give you a call to see how your solution is the one they need. This is what your podcast can help you do. But you can't let the timing element throw you off because, as I said a minute ago, you need to market your business because you need to grow. You need to get more people understanding who you are and what you do. You need to raise awareness for everything. Your podcast content can help you do that in a very, very efficient way and in a very powerful way, because not only do you create this podcast that gives you all of these opportunities to excel in the audio world where you're hitting them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and giving your potential clients and current clients an opportunity to learn from you on the go, because podcast content is passive, but you're also creating content for yourself to check off all those other boxes. So timing should never be a factor, and never think pushing this downstream is a good idea, because getting your podcast in motion now is going to set you up for success as you move forward. And the more acclimated you get to the process, the better it's going to be for your long-term benefits. When it comes to time, factor in how much time you do have to dedicate and think about all the other things that you have on your plate that you need to accomplish. If you have a ton of work that you know you need to do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, perhaps doing a weekly podcast is not the right approach. Perhaps it makes more sense to do your podcast in season format, where you can create episodes that are dedicated to a certain subject, and now you've built an asset all referencing something that you are very passionate about, that you are extremely knowledgeable on, and ultimately it serves your clients, because when they see it, they know they've found the right resource, that you're continuing to push your authority forward. Or if someone is looking for solutions and you have that solution that they need, they find your podcast, they can listen to it. It serves as a living, breathing salesperson that could ultimately help move them from, well, I'm looking for this solution, I'm not quite sure where to find it, to, oh my God, I trust this person and this brand more than anybody, I'm ready to go. And they pick up the phone and they call you. Or maybe they do a form. I don't know. We're not calling anybody anymore. It's 2024. Kind of a crazy world. Just kidding. But they're contacting you. They're bringing you into their world. This all happens because you put a great podcast in front of them. So when it comes to time, Think about where you are with everything on your plate. That's going to determine how you structure the format of your show. If you have time to do a weekly podcast, great. If you don't, there's no reason why you can't do a podcast. And that's something that does scare people off. Oh man, I just don't have time to do this weekly, so I'm not going to do it. No, look at doing it in season format. Think about the best way to build something that serves as an asset and a resource for your brand. And in doing that, you are going to create a boatload of content that you can utilize for months at a time. And you can recycle and reuse and repurpose that content in a number of different ways. When it comes to timing, do not push this initiative downstream. I believe we are moving very slowly, but very surely towards a world where brands have their website, they have their social media presence, and they have their podcast. And all three of these items work in synergy to grow brands and to let people know what you do and how your brand can help them. Pushing this downstream will not benefit you at all. You have to think about the marketing that you're already doing and what you can do to simplify things. If you need help understanding how a podcast can help you simplify these marketing strategies, hit me up. I'd love to have a conversation with you and show you how this can work for you in an efficient manner and can help build the content that you need to take your brand to undeniable levels. So that is going to do it for today's episode of Podcast Theory. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. I'll be back with you on the next episode with more explosive podcast insight. Until that happens and our paths cross again, my name is Jason Sircone. This has been Podcast Theory. Good talk. I'll see you out there.